Dems the rules, or is it rules are meant to be broken? I don't know.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
You know, I often talk about the pain of conversations from time to time on public policy, and I often say I would rather put a pin in my eye, you know, than talk about some of the minutia that goes on in government. This one's close, but it's important, and I don't know how to, maybe my good guest tonight will find a way to pizzazz this thing up, because whether a bill is seen 48 hours in front of its initial review, or what happens with the late part of the session and blah, 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 we're talking about the General Assembly here, is the kind of thing that can cost you a career if you talk about it too much. Because people, so but it's important. Did I say that twice? Welcome and thanks for tuning in to My State of Mind. That's why we call it this. You know, we'll snore away. But our executive director of Common Cause, John Marion, is here to explain how important this really is. And you know, I always trust his take. He's got very, very good instincts on what is right and what is wrong when it comes to running the government. And he'll explain the battle really between the established leadership in the House of Representatives and this group that's making a move, and whether or not the move is really about ultimate good or just a means to their nefarious end. Anyway, having said that, here's a headline from what's going on in the world today. How about that? I need to pick this one up on CNN Politics. Good get on this one. Not that it's, you know, not available, but you want to know how many emergencies we've had? We're in the middle of 32. And if you want to know what they are, they very simply, they're moves of the administration all the way back a couple, 3 decades now makes when they have to spend money that's not in the budget for purposes that feel urgent. And most of them are reactions to military matters. Most of them are 9/11. There might be some action that a covert group of military need to do, and an emergency is declared in order to be able to get that done because things have got to be rearranged. It's actually a fascinating list. You ought to take a look at it. By no means do any of the things on the list look like the argument that the president is reportedly making. Now, you watch this show at 7:30 on MyRI TV or midnight on Fox Providence. Between the two programs, the president was scheduled to speak to the nation about the plight, humanitarian and national security at the border. We'll have to react to this move coming up, but it's really interesting. I mean, in the next couple of days. It is amazing. I can't figure out whether or not the president came up with this on his own or whether he just said, oh my God, what a great idea, when a reporter asked him about this last week. In the meantime, our Congressman David Cicilline is on the border, was down in New Mexico investigating a tragedy down there. Here's the latest from his visit.
8-year-old Felipe Gomez Alonso was the second child to die while in U.S. custody. Now, Rhode Island Congressman David Cicilline and 8 other members of Congress want answers. After visiting Border Patrol facilities in Alamogordo, New Mexico, Congressman Cicilline says more needs to be done to ensure the safety of migrants trying to cross the border.
This is a humanitarian crisis. This is not a national security crisis.
On Christmas Eve, Felipe Gomez Alonso was the second Guatemalan child to die in 1 month while in custody near the Mexican border. Authorities say the boy was sick with a fever and vomiting and later died in a New Mexico hospital. Now members of Congress launched an investigation into the death.
And what we saw again at this facility is a facility that doesn't have sufficient personnel, sufficient resources, sufficient medical protocol to protect against that. And although some improvements have been made and they were explained by Dr. Eastman, I think there's a long way to go.
The president blamed Democrats for the children's deaths, saying it's because of weak immigration policies that allow people to enter the country illegally. President Trump announced a primetime address for Tuesday, earlier floating the idea he may declare a state of national emergency.
We have to have border security. If we don't have border security, we're going to be crime-ridden, and it's going to get worse and worse.
And if he does plan to bypass Congress for border wall funding,
we would challenge it in every single way that we could, in Congress, in the courts, and otherwise.
Okay, so the battle is on, and this is the process by which this comes to a head. I will tell you, the courts, I think, are going to be a difficult place for Donald Trump to navigate, but I've stopped making predictions. It's 1 hour at a time these days on matters coming out of Washington. So we'll stay tuned to that. In the meantime, the conversation tonight is about this. Reform Caucus calls on Speaker Marion, who, by the way, is scheduled to be here on Thursday, to publish bills a couple of days before a vote. And my guest will explain why that matters. John Marion is the boss of Common Cause. Happy New Year, pal.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I didn't mean to diminish the high drama that you are capable of bringing to the program at the top of the show.
I have my analogies. I'm going to try.
You got
to
something?
spin some things.
Jack it up, baby, because this is hard. Don't you agree with me? This is hard for the average, and I consider myself to be one, average citizen to be engaged in.
Well, so over the weekend, it was wild card weekend, right? And watched some football. And there was a really controversial call in one of the games where the guy caught the ball, but they whistled it dead. And none of the players ran to pick it up, right? And
oh yeah. That was in what game was that?
I'm forgetting which game it was. It wasn't.
It was a first ever.
It was on Sunday, not Saturday.
It was on Sunday. Yeah, he caught it. There's no doubt that he fumbled it, that he had possession fumbled, but no one picked it up. Yep. And so because no one retrieved it, it was rendered incomplete.
By the end of the broadcast, they were showing excerpts of the rule book.
Right.
And parsing a sentence to describe why the referees did what they did in that instance, right?
Yes.
And ultimately, it came down to that touchdown, that potential touchdown.
Yeah.
It decided the game,
yes.
Right? Had he caught the ball, it had been ruled a catch, he caught the ball, that team would have won. I think it might have been Seattle. And so, so the rules matter in all sorts of ways. They matter in the NFL. They matter so much in the NFL that they now bring a rules official into the booth with them to ask questions, and they have the rule book.
By the way, where's Kev? Is Kev here? Kev left? Kev would know this. Kev usually supervises this program. Call Kev. He will, because it's going to drive me crazy as to what game it was. I said, you know you're getting old when, the games that just happened this weekend, you can't just draw on it.
There were a lot of games this weekend.
Anyway, but this is really good.
Rules matter, and they matter up at the General Assembly in the same exact way, right? Because it determines how the entire 6-month session plays out. The entire football game plays out according to the ref's interpretation of the rules, which seems in the modern NFL to change week to week, certainly season to season. In the General Assembly, every 2 years the rules change. This is the week they're likely to change. And they're going to determine the next 2 years. And what they're trying to do is essentially leave them, for the most part, unchanged. And the current rules,
they being the established leadership.
The leadership of the House, and we're talking just about the House at this point. The Senate will do their rules in a few weeks. The House rules stack the deck so that if you're a rank and file legislator with an idea, even an idea that a majority of your colleagues like, if the Speaker doesn't like the idea doesn't get a vote. And there was a great Providence Journal article on Monday showing when the deck got stacked, right? February of 2005.
Yeah, we have a headline on that one, Eric. It's the Reform Caucus stems from 2005 headline that Mr. Marion refers to. Then Speaker Murphy was at the helm, and a Republican state representative is at the center of the article.
Yep, and this was retaliation for separation of powers.
Who's at the center of the article?
Nick Gorham.
Nick Gorham from the hinterlands, Foster, Gloucester, out there.
Yep, and Common Cause.
He was a good legislator.
Common Cause had worked with him and a bunch of legislators, Democrats and Republicans alike, to get separation of powers a vote on the ballot. But Bill Murphy, after it had passed in 2004, saw his opportunity. The coalition sort of fell apart. The deal was done on separation of powers, and he pounced, and he changed the rules so that bills no longer get votes in committees. And he changed the rules that it's hard to get things out of committee, if not impossible, unless
well, some bills
one
get votes
person.
in committees.
They get votes to be held for further study, but they don't get up and down votes. So it used to be, 20 years ago, if you went to the General Assembly, things got voted down regularly in committee. Marriage equality got voted down. David Cicilline was the only vote for marriage equality 20 years ago. There were votes on separation of powers, where separation of powers got voted down year after year.
In committee.
In committee. Now, they don't get up or down, they get, we're going to put this on the table, held for further study. That's not a vote on whether you approve it or not. It's a vote on whether the thing should just sit there. And Murphy...
So remind me, how does a bill move from committee to the floor for passage?
It moves if the Speaker decides it should get a up or down vote.
So the committees are just performing a perfunctory vetting process without formally weighing in themselves.
So I want to be careful. A lot of committee members spend a lot of hours listening to a lot of testimony.
And they don't vote anymore?
They only vote. The vast majority of bills, the only vote they get is whether or not to hold them for further study, not to reject them or accept them.
But they are not prohibited from voting.
They're not prohibited from voting, except for the fact that the Speaker tells the committee chair
what he wants,
when to give it an up or down vote. So the example I go to is in 2013. It was late one night. Patty O'Neill was a state rep. He had
from Pawtucket.
He had left the leadership team earlier in the session, and he noticed that he had the votes in the room to get the resolution on the Ethics Commission that we'd been supporting for years out of committee. So made a motion, Doreen Costa seconded it. Suddenly there's a vote, it goes to the floor. The Speaker hadn't approved that vote. They came back the next night and they annulled that vote. They literally said, we're nullifying that vote, we're striking it from the record, because it wasn't approved by then Speaker Fox. Every vote that a committee takes has to currently get pre-approval from the third floor.
All right, well, the Speaker certainly has his own opinion on this, and when we come back, you'll hear a little of his perspective and preview of our conversation coming up on Thursday. Stay with us. This particular package by Ted is a classic at the end. Watch.
Representative Jason Knight admits the General Assembly's written rules don't get a lot of attention.
Nevertheless, like the spark plugs in your car, it's key to the process.
But on Wednesday, Knight and 15 fellow House Democrats offered a set of changes they say will help them better serve their constituents.
We are all joined together for one common goal, and that is to create open, fair, and transparent legislative process.
Their suggestions include publishing the text of bills at least 48 hours before a final vote.
48 hours is the least we could do.
And making it harder to suspend the rules so brand new bills don't pass late at night.
A great many of the members don't like it. The public doesn't like it.
Common Cause Rhode Island's John Marion supports the ideas, but House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello has not said if he does. We spoke with him on Tuesday.
We will make sure that our rules are fair, promote collaboration, are very inclusive to all, but that there's an appropriate screening process so bad ideas don't go through.
I find that to be, I get his point, but I find it to be funny. You know, who's the arbiter of good and bad ideas? He is.
Yeah, so the idea here, and the idea isn't just to the Reform Caucus. Brian Newberry, a former Republican leader, had a great op-ed in the Projo last October with some other rules changes. There are a number of ideas being floated out there, most of which we think are good ideas for taking the process back to where there are more votes so that the people you elect go up there to take and make tough decisions and there's more transparency, so they're not doing it in the dark of night with the rules suspended. And if they are, they're on the record that they suspended
Here's the thing. Now, give me your analysts rather than advocacy, and there's a difference. For Common Cause, you're an advocate for good governments. That's your mission, and thank goodness for your work. But give me some analytical now. Is this a virtuous effort on the part of the progressive reform movement? Well, I should say the progressive movement and the reform caucus are now kind of one and the same, but there's an ideological motivation that is inspiring this group. They don't like the speaker, but that's a byproduct of their mission on a lot of different kinds of things. Some would call it very left liberal politics. If they were the majority, getting their way, running the ship the way they wanted to, would they be so concerned about the rules? This is kind of the age-old unanswerable question, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, I would say what I think happened here is that there was a bill last year on pay equity, and the bill was changed by the leadership, and the sponsor was largely unaware of the changes and tried to sort of withdraw her support for her own bill, because she didn't ultimately support the changes. That crystallized the importance of the rules for a lot of people who cared about that bill. And they came to spend the last 6 months talking and looking and reading the rules. And I think, you know, it's a little bit like they had a baptism by fire, and now they believe that the system needs to change. Some may be motivated simply by the desire for more progressive public policy. I wouldn't debate that. But I think there is a genuine interest in reform, having talked to several of them, to make the House more small d democratic.
Real quick, Blake Filippi, a state representative from Block Island et al. Down there, Republican, and player now in the Republican Party. Has he been?
He's the minority leader.
He's the minority leader. That's right. Hey, sometimes what happens in the phone booth gets by me from time to time. But he'll be here tomorrow to talk about this. But what's your take on the Republicans? They've been quiet. And usually they are historically the most offended by rules intended to screw those who don't have power.
Yeah. So I think there's sort of a dance occurring, right? Which is, they suspect that the Reform Caucus is just there for progressive legislation. And so they've been reluctant to kind of toss their hat in the ring with them. But they, too, want similar types of changes to the rules because it tries to let good ideas rise to the top. And I understand from talking to both sides that they've talked to each other, but haven't come to sort of a coalition around this. I hope that they can see eye to eye on this, because I think there's a chance when the rules ultimately get to the floor, for them to get close to the needed votes to make some changes.
In the meantime, the Senate has had this really interesting thing going on. Not to spend a lot of time on it, because I want to ask you about South Kingstown and some developments there today at the Ethics Commission. But there were two senators, Nesselbush and Bell, who wanted to see the votes cast for leadership to be secret ballots, ironically, because they wanted to be able to vote conscience without fear of retribution. What's your Common Cause take on that?
So we didn't take a position on their proposal, because their proposal was that they be secret ballots in the Democratic Party caucus. And to us,
right,
the Democratic Party caucus is essentially a quasi-private organization.
True.
And so had they been proposing a secret ballot on the floor vote, the official vote, we would have been opposed to that.
Because you want to see what your legislator is doing.
That's the public process.
But they still suggest that even the public vote is one which, causes you to be in the doghouse, and it would be better for a private vote so that they could throw their elbows around a little bit.
Yeah, so we stayed out of that fight because that was a fight about the Democratic Party, and we're nonpartisan. But they're making some interesting points over there.
Yeah, no doubt. When we come back, a little development on an ethics query today regarding a controversial elected official in South Kingstown. We'll get John's take on that real quick when we come back.
Eagles-Bears.
1 minute.
Headline that kind of previewed one Sarah Markey, who's some compelling local school committee member. She was first suggested as a fill-in for a vacancy on the school committee, which was an appointment that would come from the South Kingstown Town Council. The council leader there looked for, we okay? Good. Looked for an advisory from their council, and it was a pretty explicit discussion of how she really has more or less not much to do because of her NEA employment. She's a high-level executive with the National Education Association, teacher union, and then she would be conflicted. She was at the Ethics Commission today and got a ruling that she can't vote on collective bargaining matters or anything about grievances on personnel. She kind of tweeted out that, yeah, you know, thank goodness for the Ethics Commission. Like, she's completely clueless in my mind as to what restrictions are really imposed on her and how she can't even meet in private in executive session and even have a deliberation or influence anybody. What's your take on this?
So these are difficult questions because oftentimes these ethics things come down to a specific set of facts. And so the Ethics Commission told her, for instance, that she can't use confidential information she gains as a school board member in her to help her employee.
Yeah, who's the police on that?
But yeah, essentially it's going to come down to people will file complaints and the Ethics Commission will have to make decisions on the facts of the complaints.
Well, I think she's going to be there up every other Tuesday, you know, with everything that comes in front of her, because she's going to, if she's smart and doesn't want to end up paying ethics fines out the wazoo, she's going to have most of what she decides on cleared, including closing school buildings, because if number of teachers' jobs are impacted, it's an NEA issue right off the bat, and that wasn't spoken to today. So
yeah, so I think walking out of there, there's going to be, there are a lot of unanswered questions. She got some clarity on some very concrete things she asked, but there's and this is often the case up there. You know, they say come back when other potential conflicts arise, and she'll have to.
Yeah, come back in front of your potential conflicts, which shall be many, or come back when someone files a complaint against you because you've screwed up. That's what you do from time to time, don't you?
Yeah, we don't file many, but we have.
You have. All right, thanks for the football analogy. By the way, it was Chicago and Philadelphia.
There we go.
It had nothing to do with the blocked field goal that nobody knew was blocked.
Yeah.
Good sports stuff, though. God, you're
Not
versatile.
bad.
You are versatile. John Marion, folks. Final word when we come back. By the way, there is this issue of a discharge petition where a majority of legislators can demand that a bill be voted upon by the total General Assembly if 38 sign the petition to do so. John tells me during the break, if you want details and analysis on that, you are required to see the movie Legally Blonde 2. So not only are we getting football analogies, we're getting Hollywood analogies in order to make this whole conversation about General Assembly legislative rules more palatable. He gets an A for an effort tonight, no doubt about that. We'll see you tomorrow with the new minority leader of the State House, and of course on the radio at 3 until 6. Good night.